Stacy with the Stacy Esser Group, and I'm back with Elliot Malone,
Hello.
attorney. And last we left you, we were talking about what other professionals you might need to hire when you were in an attempt to assess or reassess your taxes. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So tell us, what other professionals might need to be called upon, and how would one know whether they're working with you, or, as you had stated in the previous video, whether they decided to go about getting their taxes reassessed without you?
Perfect. So I guess we should start with the process of filing an appeal. One of the things that you have to submit with your filing, whether an attorney or you're doing it yourself, is comparable sales that are acceptable sales or usable sales from the prior period.
Okay, so in the last video we discussed that your friend's house, although you think it's totally you're not your friends. If somebody's house
Right.
that you feel is taxed lower is not a comp for you. It has to be a house that's sold within a certain period of time.
Correct. So if your
What is
neighbor's
that period
house,
of time, by the way?
So
Could it be a year, 2 years? How far
it would
back?
be October from the 2 years prior until October to the prior year. So it's a 12-month period, pretty much October 1st, to September 30th,
Got it.
October 1st. So that within that 12-month period, there was sales in your town. You could go in other towns if needed, but you really want to use comparables that are as close to your comparable, which means that it should be in the same town.
So let's
Similar.
stop there for 1 second. So just because it's kind of similar to doing a
Right.
market analysis, when we're focusing in on comparables,
Right.
we're focusing in on the property size, the location,
Right.
biggest being if you're on maybe a very busy street
Yes.
as opposed to a private road. Those would really stand out.
Right.
It would be the size of the dwelling, right?
Correct.
It would be the bedrooms, the bathrooms, the if the basement's finished or not finished, if there's a pool, not a pool, and then the condition of the home. So
Exactly.
how old is the home, and how recently has the home been updated?
Exactly.
Those would be would you agree?
Absolutely. If your best comparable is if your neighbor's house is exactly the same as your house, built in the same period, renovated in the same period, and it's sold within that period, same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, that's the best comparable. If your own house sold, so if you purchased a house during that 12-month period, that's a great comparable, as long as you didn't buy it from a bank, and there's a whole bunch of list of
Right.
things that
So if
make
you're
it
buying a-
non-usable.
Right, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
So what you're saying is there's a whole bunch of things that were in that big book
Yes.
that we showed the last video.
Right.
But basically, if you're buying a short sale or a foreclosure, a bank-owned property, that's really not going to be considered a comp
That's
if
correct.
that's what you're buying.
Right.
Okay, and you can't use it as a comp for a previous sold.
Right.
Okay, so we got that. So you're saying first you go and find those sold comparables, which, by the way, we help our clients with
Oh,
all
absolutely.
the time. I mean, this is basically the assessment we do when we're doing a market analysis.
Correct.
So you could definitely enlist your realtor to help you with this.
Yeah, and Stacy's great with that. I mean, when you're looking for properties, you're always looking at what's sold, how the market is, where it's trending. She'll send you the 12 months specifically in that specific home, and you'll have that info. Now, it's going to be hard to find exact comparables. So what happens then is you need to adjust it. He has an extra bedroom, I have an extra bathroom, I have a deck, I have a pool, and so forth. The way you do that is by getting a professional appraiser.
Right, so
That's
now-
one of the
right.
professionals that you should definitely do, unless it's a clear-cut case. If it's the subject property that traded,
Right.
then you don't really need that, because at the end of the day, here's the market value. It's an arm's length transaction. It wasn't between relatives or
Right.
friends or anything like that.
Right.
So you should consider getting an appraiser.
Right, because as a realtor, I'm going to give you a market analysis. It's not an appraisal.
Correct.
So, but we know when an appraiser is working on a market analysis, or an appraisal rather, when an appraiser is working on an appraisal, you don't change the subject property, you change the comparable
You make
properties.
adjustments.
You make adjustments,
Exactly.
right? So you hire an appraiser. I'm just doing that now with a seller who's putting their house on the market next year.
Right.
And they're hiring a professional appraiser first to go through the house. So yeah. So then so we have an appraiser. So what else?
And even though that's not required, it makes your case stronger. So
Right.
in most of my cases, unless they're open and shut, where the subject property traded or it's listed for sale or something like that, we hire an appraiser. Then there's other professionals. You may need an engineer. You may need a surveyor.
So why would somebody need an engineer or a surveyor, and and how would they know that they need those people?
If it gets to the point where you need somebody outside of an appraiser, get a lawyer.
Okay,
Because,
ding, ding, ding.
right. Because at that point, it would be a complicated appeal. It could be an issue with the wetlands. It could be an issue with the size of the property.
Right.
So if you're disputing the acreage or the lot size with the town, you want to have a surveyor because you want to have somebody
Right.
testifying at the hearing. And if you have wetlands or something along that line, then you want to have an engineer. But if it's just your basic standard, home appeal, I would say at least get an appraiser
Right.
and get that done.
And you know what? This is what you do.
Right.
So, if this is what you do, I say hire you, or at least call you for a consultation,
Absolutely.
and you'll tell somebody, you know what, you don't need me, you're good.
Absolutely. And if an appeal is, and we spoke about that previously, if an appeal is not lucrative enough for an attorney
Right.
to spend the time and get involved, you could still hire an appraiser.
So now let's fast forward to the topic of the process.
Sure.
So does it go to court? Is there a judge? What does it look like down the road?
So the first thing you want to do, go talk to your tax assessor in town. You may bypass the whole appeal. You may bypass the whole process. You may not even need an attorney. Go talk to them, see if they're able to justify why your house is assessed the way it is. See how you feel about that, and maybe it's going to be corrected. I know that most assessors that I've dealt with, either on personal properties or, for clients, are happy to at least talk to you and explain and go through the process.
Right.
Of course, they're also limited, by certain things as well, and they have to be fair and equitable, and their understanding of market value may be very different than your understanding of market value.
Right. So, I've had experiences where the town officials have been fabulous and just sat and really explained everything.
Right.
And people don't often think to do that, actually, and it's
First thing you should do.
It's a very good point.
Because
yeah.
it saves you money,
Yeah.
and it saves the town money. Because if you do file an appeal, now they have to hire an attorney,
Yeah.
or the town attorney, and they have to spend time on it. But assuming that fails, assuming you can't
Okay.
get into some sort of a
Doesn't
compromise,
work. What's next?
next you make sure that you either speak with an attorney or understand the process. The deadline we mentioned, in the first session is typically April 1st. So you have to submit your form, your application, go through that process. Then you have a period of time to get your experts in line, to get your professionals in line, to get your sold comparable
So basically,
properties.
to prepare your case,
Yes.
to take into consideration, or rather gather all the collateral,
Correct.
right? So now it's your evidence.
This is it.
This is it. This is our evidence.
If you can't justify why you're asking for a reduction,
Right.
then you shouldn't
They should not be
shouldn't
asking
be
for it.
asking for it.
Right. So we have good evidence. We have all the supporting paperwork. We have a fabulous attorney. Next.
Now we go to the county. So you're going to get a date, and that's going to be the hearing date.
Okay.
So that usually a town gets one or two hearing dates, depending on the number of appeals. You go to the county. If it's Bergen County, you go to the Hackensack. And
When you say you, are you saying your client or you?
so whoever filed the appeal, if it's the attorney,
Let's assume for the moment
Right.
that it's okay. It's the
so
attorney.
we go
We go.
to the
Okay,
county.
let's go.
If we have an expert, then the client doesn't have to be there. If we don't have an expert, the attorney can testify as to your property, only you could.
Okay.
So the attorney would prepare you, tell you what questions they're going to ask, and it's a hearing. There's a commissioner. The hearing's in front of the commissioner. The town presents their case, and they may have experts as well, not just the tax assessor. They may hire somebody to do an appraisal. Then you get your experts, you present your case, and then the commissioner makes a decision. But it doesn't stop there. If you're not happy with the commissioner's decision, then you can file an appeal directly to the county tax court. And then from there, if you're not happy, you could go to the appellate division, but then it gets into more complex litigation.
So have you? How far have you gone?
I've never had to go very far. I haven't had to go very far because at the end of the day, if both parties are reasonable, there's some sort of a settlement.
Right.
You're asking for 1.2 million, the town is at 1.4 million. Can we settle for 1.3?
So there's a win-win there.
There is.
Everybody wants that win-win typically.
And I think a settlement is good for both sides.
Okay.
In any case. Now, if your property is assessed at over $1 million, you could bypass the whole commissioner county level and you could go right into the tax court. Sometimes it makes sense to do that, but more often than not, the county commissioner is really a free take. You know, because if you're not happy with the way it turns out, you could always appeal to the tax court.
Right.
So I always recommend, I don't remember a time that we went directly into tax court.
Right.
We go to the commissioner. Commissioners are usually
Right.
fair and balanced. They look at everything and they
Right.
come up with what they think is the value.
So this is fabulous information. And is there any limit to how many times you can appeal your taxes? Let's say I appealed my taxes in 2017. Could I appeal them again in 2018?
So remember, we spoke about the one-way street. So as a homeowner, there's no limit to how many times you could appeal. But if you appeal and the commissioner gives a value, then you're locked for that value, or the town is locked from increasing your taxes for an additional 2 years. So it's really a 3-year process. It's the current year plus 2 additional years. And the reason that's there is because they don't want tax assessors saying, well, I didn't agree with the commissioner, so now I'm going to increase it the following year.
Got it.
So you get it for at least 3 years, but it doesn't stop you from going in and appealing the following year if market conditions change.
Is there ever a situation where you go in an appeal and they raise your taxes?
It could happen.
I mean, that wouldn't happen if somebody was hiring an attorney, but maybe if they didn't do their due diligence, then maybe it would happen if they did it on their own.
I've heard some stories. I don't know anybody that it happened to, but the town does have the ability to also have a claim to increase your taxes. That would happen in really, really egregious situations. For example, you're assessed at 1.2 million. Your house is on the market for 2.5 million. If they come to me,
that never happens.
if they come to me, I would say I strongly recommend that you don't appeal your assessment.
That's when it's not a good idea.
Not a good idea. You really, or there's some, and that's another thing. Good thing, I remember that. When you go and speak with your assessor, be nice.
Aren't we always supposed to be nice?
Yeah, but that doesn't work. They're there, they're doing their job.
Right.
They're looking out for the town's best interest. They have people to report to as well. They have the county, they have the state, they have the school. I can assure you that if you go in there with an attitude,
blazing,
saying my neighbor is this, my neighbor is that, you're ripping me off, this is highway robbery, I've heard it all.
Yeah.
Chances are you're going to have to go through the appeal, and chances are you're not going to be very successful.
So be nice.
Be nice.
The golden rule, right?
Worst case scenario, it doesn't work and you go through the process.
That makes total sense.
Same thing when you get pulled over by a police officer. Be nice.
Do you do that also?
I don't do municipal, but
okay.
but be nice.
Be nice.
It helps.
We're going to be nice. We're
going to be nice.
Nice is good.
So, I mean, that's pretty much the process.
All right, we got it.
It's not a complicated process.
Yeah.
If you go through the guide, and there's plenty of guides, and we'll share links with you, you could very likely do it yourself.
Right.
Is it worth it? Probably not, because the only time that you should do it yourself is if you could reduce it by a little bit and an attorney doesn't make any sense. But if you have an attorney who's willing to take your case, you're paying a third or whatever the attorney charges from the first year, and then you get the benefit of it going forward.
Right, but as you said, if the attorney takes your case, it means you probably have a good case.
Right.
That's it, because they're not getting paid unless it works. So.
And I'm going to put a little plug in there. If you are represented by an attorney, chances are your result is going to be a little bit better.
Well, it's the same thing when I'm putting a plug in too, when somebody tries to sell their house by themselves.
Right, sell by owner, the favorite thing by agents.
Yeah, we love that. Yeah, well, statistically it's going to sell for less, so that's...
You're right, and I just saw an article, recently about that. When you hire an attorney to take care of tax appeals, or when you hire a real estate agent to take care of the sale of your property, you're not really losing any money, because chances are your benefit is going to be greater, and they end up paying for themselves.
If people have more questions, they can obviously reach out to us on the blog.
Absolutely.
Or they can contact you, or they'll contact me. But this was great. I mean, it's a beast of a topic for sure. And
it adds up to a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, and we pay so much money in this area, and it's painful. So if you are paying too much, or if you're curious whether you are paying too much, then reach out, talk to me, talk to somebody like Elliot, and let's start just by looking at comparable solds in the last 12 months, and then we'll go to the next step and maybe hire an appraiser and or go and get Elliot involved, and all of that are probably the three steps, right?
Yeah, and I get phone calls regularly with people that aren't sure how to do the math and everything. They'll call me up within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I'll plug in the numbers, I'll get the equalization ratio,
Yeah.
I'll give them my analysis of how successful it may or may not be, and then they can make a decision.
People ask me, what is the town's market value have to do with what that house sells for? I mean, there's no direct link. There's no real great way to answer that. It's not necessarily the market value. It's a piece of the whole puzzle.
Correct.
So I always look at it. I look at the land value, the improvement value, that total assessed value, because it helps me dig deeper.
Right.
But it's just one piece. It's definitely just like a Zestimate is not the only. They're all pieces of the puzzle. So we just have to, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100%. To calculate your actual taxes, it's not just a matter of looking at the assessment. It's not just a matter of looking at the market value. You got to look at the ratios. You got to look at when was the last time there was a reevaluation.
Right.
You can't compare market value to assessed value, especially in different towns.
Right.
Because different towns have different equalization ratios.
Right.
Some care about them, some don't. Some are at 100. Some have seen as low 70s.
Right.
So market value is what somebody's willing to pay for.
There you go.
That's it.
All right, we're gonna go on that note.
Cool.
So thank you so
Pleasure.
much. It was
My
great.
pleasure.
It was really
Anytime.
great. So I'm Stacy Esser. This is Elliot Malone, and thank you so much for watching. And we'll see you soon on the next video.